Clunn Day, Clunn Day, Clunn Day. That's right. Rick Clunn starts his residency in this episode. On top of that, it is the return of Jake's Take. That's right. Bassmaster videographer extraordinaire tells us the true behind the scenes of what really happened on Scott Martin's record-breaking day on Lake Okeechobee. Both of them join me this week. Oh.
I'm Bob Cobb from the Bassmaster. Welcome to Mercer.
Welcome one, welcome all, friends, family, freeloaders, fishing freaks, humpers. You're all welcome here at the Awkwardly Honest Fishing Podcast that goes by my last name, which is Mercer. Welcome into the 147th edition of the Mercer Podcast, and I thank you for choosing to spend a little time with me here this week. You guys are incredible. I thank you each and every week for making this show what it is. I thank you for all the comments. I thank you for all the thumbs up. I thank you for all the reviews on all our streaming services because you guys have really increased that. So go in and say something about the show, whatever you feel. If you think this show has earned a time in your week, will help us stroke the algorithm by giving a thumbs up, leaving a comment, leaving a review, or, hey, tell a buddy about it, and we'll keep this community growing. We have an incredible show this week, 2 incredible guests. But before I talk about them, I want to talk about something very serious, something that some of you may already know about because it's been pretty widely publicized in the fishing community, and that makes me proud of our community. But Miles Berghoff, who is a Bassmaster Open competitor, a professional angler, a great human being, him and his wife, Katie, have a beautiful daughter, Riley. And last week, they found out while Miles was pre-fishing for the Okeechobee Open that they got the call that no parent wants to get. Riley has cancer. And it's a very rare cancer. And their life is drastically about to change. Like every parent, they'll stop everything they're doing just to make sure their child is safe. But when you're a professional angler, that comes with a lot of headaches. Obviously, he has a dream job, but when you're not able to do your job, things get more difficult financially. Never mind the fact that they're going to have tons and tons of bills and expenses while they work with Riley towards her recovery. And the good news is, I know they're seeing the fine people at St. Jude's, which are the best people around to see. And Riley's already started that process to get better. But I want this community, the community that I tell you guys how proud I am of every single week. I don't ask you to do a lot, but they have set up a GoFundMe. And I'm going to make a donation. And I'd encourage all of you to make a donation. How big, how little, anything helps them. I just want this community to come together and do something really cool and support Miles and Katie Berghoff and, of course, Riley's recovery. And Miles, I'll be honest, Miles is not somebody who I know real well. I mean, he's a great human being anytime I've ever spent any time with him. But that doesn't matter. We don't have to know them well. What we do know is they're part of our world. And this is one of those times in life that we should all come together and help them. Just to help them to make their day, their year, their troubles a little bit better. And I get it. There's a lot of people facing a lot of things. But Miles is one of ours. He's part of this sport. Let's show that family in the world how special this community is, and I'd encourage you to make a donation at their GoFundMe. As I said, I'm going to make a donation. I will put the links to it in the description, in the comments, in everything I can to make sure it's easy for you guys. If you can make a donation, if you can share it, if you can tell somebody about it, because this is one of those situations where it's going to take a village, and our village is strong. So let's show that. if you're willing, if you can. Now, there's no good way to segue from that, but I always say this show is supposed to be one thing. It's supposed to be an opportunity for people to get a break from the real troubles in life. I mean, we're not doing anything serious here. We're just having conversations. And this week, we have two very, very incredible conversations. First, we're going to be joined with the return of Jake's Take. Jake Latendresse, Bassmaster videographer extraordinaire, returns. And for those longtime viewers, you know Jake's Take. You guys have been asking for it to return. Well, finally, it will be returning to the show here this week. And Jake had a very unique perspective. Jake was on the back deck of the boat with Scott Martin when he made history on Lake Okeechobee. So we are going to get the insiders behind-the-scenes skinny from Jake Latendresse. And as if that's not enough, it is Clunn Day. Clunn Day, Clunn Day. That's right. Rick Clunn starts his podcast residency here this month. I mean, we're just calling it residency. I don't know if that's the right term or not, but it makes sense to me. He's going to stop by once a month, every month for his 50th season. And we're going to talk about, well, whatever we happen to talk about, whatever Rick wants to talk about. And it always is something that we learn from. And you may be wondering why I'm calling it Clunn Day, Clunn Day, Clunn Day, because we don't have a name for this segment yet. You guys gave me some suggestions. Some of them I thought were good. None of them have been approved by the Clunn camp. It's a lot of Clunns. So keep guessing at different names we can come up with. But until further ado, it's going to be Clunn Day, Clunn Day, Clunn Day. Because he is basically the monster truck of tournament fishing. I mean, it has never, think about it. I mean, he's 77 years old and he's entering his 50th season of competition. It's an absolutely incredible, inspirational, and amazing story. And I'm thankful to have Rick Clunn on this podcast. But before we do that, we're going to hook up with Jake Latendresse with Jake's Take. Reunited and it feels so good. You're supposed to hit the next. No,
I don't know the next line. I'm just dancing with you, Dave.
All right.
What's up?
All right.
What's up, dude?
Oh, just happy to have you back in my life, dude.
God, it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, the fact that we're talking means that we're going back to work and the season has started. But before we get into this season and what you were lucky enough to witness this past week, how was your off season?
I missed you. I missed bass. I missed all of it. I miss it. I love my kids. Spend most of my time as a dedicated father to my children. And that's good. That's the best part of the off season is all the time I get to spend with my 3 children. So that was cool.
Yeah, I don't like it, to be honest. I mean, I've joked with you about this, but I watch your children and your son doing 2-a-days boxing. Your daughters are training for anything, really, everything, like advanced, like you're making some superhumans there while my children get really good at video games.
Well, that's the goal. My kids are, I just want to keep them active and they're athletic, and I found the right coaches. I'm lucky enough to have the right coaches very close to my proximity in my residence. So, it worked out. Call it fate or whatever.
Well, no, I think you're a good dad, dude. I think it's awesome to see that all evolving, and you got to see something pretty awesome. For those of you that have never met Jake, I mean, the podcast continues to grow, shockingly enough. But Jake Latendresse, obviously one of my good buddies, but also Bassmaster videographer extraordinaire. And this is a segment that you're going to get used to seeing in the next little while called Jake's Take, where we kind of break down what you got to see. And normally it's just an Elite Series event, but man, you saw some incredible history, obviously being part of the Okeechobee tournament this past weekend. And the tournament champion was the one and only Scott Martin. And guess who was on the back deck of Scott Martin's boat?
Me. First of all, let me say this about the Bass Opens. They're beginning to feel to have this elite feel to them because everybody is so good now and they're so competitive. And there's like 17 former Bassmaster Elite anglers in the open lineup now. There's like 8 or 9 trying to make the jump back over from Major League Fishing. And it is, and all these young guys are just freaking killing it for various reasons. But um, the feel at these opens now is really, really is much bigger than it used to be, in my opinion. And we cover, we're covering all 9 EQs, elite qualifying events this year. So that television coverage in itself, live coverage on FS1 is huge for those guys. So anybody moving up into the opens, good luck. And it's a completely different playing field now.
Yeah, and if you ask me, and I know that decision to go to 9 events to qualify was scrutinized by a bunch of people. I mean, some people on this show said they don't agree with it, and that's the truth on every decision. But I don't think you can argue with what we've seen happen as soon as we've seen it happen. The 9 qualifiers from last year, incredibly well prepared. These guys are going to be even more prepared, not just because of the 9 events, but because of they'll have been on FS1. They'll have experienced what that's like. I mean, obviously Scott Martin wasn't somebody who needs to get more experience in that department. I mean, I think he was born with a GoPro strapped to his head. But you're seeing the sport evolve, and it's really cool. I mean, it's cool to see guys like not just Scott Martin, Randall Tharp, his first event back, right back where he left things. He was he third in that? I think he finished third.
He finished third. Tucker Smith, again, here we go. You've got Scott Martin who won, Tucker Smith who was an Auburn University angler last year, won 3 high school back-to-back national championships. He comes in second and gave everyone a run for their money. And then you've got Randall Tharp who, like you said, he finished right where he left off when he left Bass, several years ago. So, and you look down the field, down the line of people, and you start going through the list of names as I was following the opens and the standings from day 1 through day 2, anticipating, who I might cover on the last day or who we were going to cover as a top 10. You look at these names and there are big names way down the list and there's new names way up on the list and vice versa. I think it's incredible. And it starts again, it's not just the opens. I mean, you're talking about, you go back and look at Bass Juniors, Bass Nations, high school tournaments, college tournaments. These people are taking this stuff very seriously because of the growth of the sport and the opportunities that it creates for young people to move up. And people like Logan Parks and JT Tompkins and people that qualified for the elites last year through the EQs give other people an opportunity, a visual opportunity to understand if they work hard, where that can take them and what that might lead to. So, hey man, here we go, bro. This is big.
When people talk about the longevity of the sport, the future of the sport, and I know it gets a lot more clicks to say it's doomed. I mean, that does seem to be the way that people, and it's how it works. But I've said this from the start. In the history of mankind, youth is undefeated. I mean, that little kid that you think, like I could whoop your son right now, but in 10 years time, there is no chance he's going to, that's just how life is. And there has never been a bigger abundance of young talent and people coming up and excitement around the sport. So while a lot of people want to focus on things that they perceive to be negative, and one of the things you said too, because I think this needs to be said, you said the young guys are kicking butt, and you did say for several different reasons. And people will say that. But here's what I'm going to say. They're doing their freaking job. Like
due diligence.
Your job has always been to be the best at what it takes to catch the 5 biggest fish. Whether somebody chooses to fish that way or not, it doesn't matter. But their job is to be the best at it. And on this particular show, also have Rick Clunn on here for his monthly visits, which is pretty exciting to say
That's
the
far
least.
out, man.
But one of the things we talk about is he was like, when flipping came, they wanted to outlaw the technique of flipping because there was just people that were fishing that particular way. It was a technique. They wanted to make the rod shorter. They wanted to do everything. That's not the tournament angler's decision. Their job, all these young guys that want to make a living at this, their job is to use the tools available to them and use them better than the other 100 guys, 150 guys, 225 guys in the opens. And that's what they're doing. And so anyways, I'll get off my soapbox, but
That's a deep hole that we could go down, a rabbit hole that we could go down, and we probably will. I mean, as the season progresses, I can absolutely see. You and I talked about this yesterday. You know, these young guys are not going anywhere, and they're only going to get better. And so, that's an abyss of a conversation that I would love to get into. We obviously don't have time to today because we still got to talk about Lake Okeechobee and what happened there, but that's a very fascinating concept. And for all those people that want to criticize it, you better hang on. You either get off the bus or hang on, because it's not going anywhere and it's moving fast.
Let's get into it real quick though, because we are into it. Like, but me and you, I mean, we shared a conversation yesterday socially, and I always say we should have the same conversations we have on the phone.
That's how this started in the first place, right?
Few words, a few creative adjectives that we use while we're talking on the phone. But dude, it's so much. And like I told you, I'm on the fence and I get hammered for that because there's part of me that loves it so much because we're learning so much. And then there's part of me that's like, it's not frog fishing and, topwater blowups that I grew up with. But it's a lot like the camera world. When they switched to digital cameras, there was a ton of people that were like, this is not for, I mean, you speak about it because you were part of that world.
I lived it. Absolutely lived it. And I don't remember what year that was, but it was probably somewhere around 2000 and I don't know, 2008 or 2010, when digital photography really started, digging its claws into the digital media world. And I remember I was the young kid. I was the Brian Evies and the Brandon Fiends and the Dalton Tumlins of my world back then. And I remember the old school guys. I told you, my buddy Greg Child from National Geographic, he talked about how digital photography would never equal film photography, and color slides and the ability to adjust those, the light and the colors in a dark room. And now, who does that anymore? Who even do? People do that for a hobby because they want to be different. They don't do it because they're trying to keep up with the Joneses anymore. And like you said yesterday, it's the same parallel with the digital equipment world and the fishing industry. And I mean, to be honest with you, it goes throughout the outdoor industry. Bow hunting, they have different types of sights and rangefinders and all kinds of stuff. Trail cameras that shoot live photos and video clips to your phone at that moment in real time, so you know what a deer is doing. I mean, what's the difference?
It's just going to keep evolving, and that, again, I've said this a bajillion times, and I honestly believe this. The coolest thing about fishing is you do it the way you want. You can have just as much fun watching a float with a worm under it, and if that's your thing, cool. If you want to fly fish, cool. You want to tie the actual bait that you catch a fish on, that's all cool. I mean, we should remember that there's the division shouldn't be in fishing, because we're not the problem. You know what I mean? Like I never look at a fly angler and be like, oh, why would you do that? Why wouldn't you get a bass boat? They're so much more bitching.
Right.
That's what that dude likes to do, or that girl likes to do, and vice versa. So anyways, we probably upset some people, but
hey man, Scott and I had this conversation on the boat when the camera was down, because he was kind enough, he knows what sells. he knows how to sell things, right? That's what he's been doing his whole life. His dad's been doing
Dude, he
it
was
before
selling
that.
mattresses this year on Black Friday. I've never seen it in pro fishing. In his story, he was
There
like,
you
"These
go.
are the mattresses I use at my guest house in Alabama." And I was like, "Good Lord, Scott Martin knows no bounds." I mean, his
Why
bank
not?
account is wonderful, I'm sure.
Why
Um,
not?
but yeah, I mean, I've been a fool buying my mattresses all these.
You gotta have a strong back on the boat on a 3 or 4 day tournament anyway, right? Rest is key. But we had this conversation, and he was kind enough to he had his back monitor on his console synced up to his front transducer, and he had that thing in perspective mode in shallow water. And I didn't ask him to. He came back there. He's got these new mounts for his graphs that are actually really incredible. They slide back and forth and they turn. You can adjust them and they lock down. They don't go anywhere. They're really, really cool. Anyhow, he came back there. He stopped what he was doing. He came back there and he put his left graph in front of me on his front perspective mode, and so I was able to film what was going on underwater. And he was in 3.5 feet of water most, I would say 99% of the time he was in 3 to 3.5 feet of water, and he was flipping. Okay. And everything he was flipping. He was flipping a wacky worm on a spinning rig, and he had Texas rigs with worms and crawlers and all kinds of stuff on his other rods. And he's flipping with his live scope on in perspective mode. And I'm back there like it's blowing my mind because I'm watching these big females, holding undercover, and these males swimming around, other males moving in, them chasing them off, another big female moving in. And I'm sitting there going, this is incredible. Like what we see and what we thought used to happen and what we see to what is actually happening, particularly in murky water, unlike what Drew Cook did at Santee Cooper, where you can see everything with your eyes anyway. You couldn't see because the water clarity wasn't there. And we're watching this, and I'm telling you, like there were times where I was just mesmerized looking through my eyepiece at what was going on, because we're learning so much about these creatures that millions and millions and millions of people love so much. And so for that, kudos to Scott Martin for allowing me to film what he was seeing and not hiding that. There at the end, he was like, let's make sure we understand that what I'm doing is not all about this front facing sonar. Okay. It's not, because his timing had to be perfect. His cast had to be perfect, and his patience to the fish and understanding that patience was really the key to him getting bit by the female, opposed to catching the bucks or not catching them at all. Because at one time, Dave, there were 87 boats around Scott Martin in this grass cove that he was in. And there were only, I think, two or three open anglers in there on the final day, and there were still, I would say, 20 to 30 boats in there on the final day, and he's still catching 7 to 9 pound fish, and I'm looking around like a periscope watching these other guys catching 2 pounders.
And it was like
So
that from day one, correct? Like, I mean, the
yes,
area he wanted
yes,
it is not
it's
a
a
secret. I mean,
no,
he
it's a
literally
community hole.
whooped the field while looking at him.
100%. And you cannot take that away from Scott Martin. And while he may have had been assisted by his electronics, that's not what it was all about. And I will give him credit and defend him all day long and all night for what he did and how he won that tournament. That was badass.
Yeah. No, again, I mean, it's his job to outfish everybody with using the tools that are legal. And if somebody thinks that they shouldn't be legal, that's your opinion. You know what I mean? Like it's that way in every sport. I mean, I don't know. I mean, obviously there's going to be a committee where they're going to make some kind of decision moving forward with it. I mean, because I do believe when the Elite Series starts, we're going to see some science projects on boats. We're going to see
100%. Yeah.
but that's because guys are seeing like that is dominating right now. Like that just like flipping did at one time. At one time You couldn't fit the rods. Rick Clunn says it. You couldn't. The rods were too long to fit in the rod lockers. They had to change the boats for that. I mean, what the future of this is, I don't know, and you don't know. But man, what Scott Martin's job was this past weekend is to dominate with the same technology that the majority of that field had, and he definitely did that.
There's no question. And he was so focused on everything that he did. I mean, I've never been in the boat with Scott Martin. I actually, like, when I got in the boat and we were making the first leg of the run, he went to one spot first because he stopped in a little spot. Again, it was a community hole and there was a bunch of people fishing there. He stopped there to check it because he didn't want to be fishing where he was, where what got him to that part, that final day. He didn't want to go there and not catch what he was catching and then have regrets about not stopping at that first spot because it was a big fish location. So he fished there. The water was really muddy. He never got a bite and he moved on. But during that little run, you know, he was he was just laser focused on what he was doing. And again, I introduced myself. I mean, we knew each other, we've been around each other, we've high-fived or knuckled or whatever, but I had to reintroduce myself because we had never officially met and said, hi, my name's Jake. Hi, I'm Scott Martin. And so we made an official introduction. So that was really my first experience with Scott. And I will have to say, I mean, it was a great experience. Scott's a different level of marketing. He's a different level
Incredible.
of incredible marketer. He's a different level of legacy and all those things that everyone has different opinions about who he is or what he does. But I will say, when you get in the boat and it's just one-on-one, which not many people have, the opportunity to be in an intimate fishing intense setting like that. Scott Martin is a human being just like everyone else, and I had a wonderful time being in his boat. And I hope he sees this and understands that that was a great experience for me. I've been in the boat with a lot of different people, had a lot of big experiences that I shared with some great anglers, and that was a top one of my definite career highlights with Bassmaster for sure.
When you say he was laser focused, like what stood out to you to kind of prove that point? Like what
Patience. 100, like, it was when you talk to him, he'll tell you that whole tournament, that especially the end there on the last day, was mostly about his patience and what he had learned the first 2 days and perhaps in practice as well. But watching the other boats around him either not catch fish or catch males all day long, and then him catching, I mean, dude, he didn't even have a fish until 11 o'clock. And then
wow.
he caught a 9 pounder. And then he caught like 4 bucks. Okay. And he adjusted. He's like, okay. I mean, I think 2 of the bucks he caught on purpose. He knew he was going to catch them. I mean, he even said before he set the hook, the bucks got it. And then he'd set the hook, and there's, it's a dink. But then literally 30 or 40 minutes later, I mean, he's got a 9, a 9.5, a 7, a 6, and it's like, holy crap. And he weighed 31 pounds, 7 ounces at the weigh-in, and he still had a 3 pounder in as well. I have
Wow.
no doubt in my mind that he had 30 or 40 more minutes to fish, he would have caught another 7 to 9 pounder because they were there and he saw him. He saw him. He just ran out of time.
Wow.
It was
Broke
insane.
all the records, the 3-day total weight record for Bassmaster ever, the Bassmaster Opens 3-day weight record. And dude was knocking on, like you said, knocking on 100 pounds for 3 days of fishing. And it's incredible. I mean, it really was. What were the boats around you guys? Like, what was the reaction? Like three
They were
days in a
cheering.
row, he is. Oh, really?
They were so kind, and there were airboats,
Well,
guys.
I guess by that time, by third day, it's only what the top 12 get to fish in the
Top
opens.
10,
Top
top
10.
10.
Okay,
Mhm.
so yeah,
And there was only one other guy. I think it was
Oh,
Easton
Fothergill,
Fothergill. He was the only other guy in that spot
college kid.
fishing, and he actually caught a 9 pounder. Like, I don't know, he was probably 85 or 90 yards away from Scott's boat, and then there were airboats that had come through the cattails that had parked out beside us. There were other anglers. There were some open guys that didn't make the last day that were out there fishing, and there were guides with clients, all those things. And everyone that was around him said, "Are we in your way, Scott?" And the bantering back and forth was quite fascinating too, because Scott has learned over time, particularly with his dad as his mentor and all of his experiences being a superstar in the bass fishing industry. He was so kind to everyone. Even the guy in the airboat he was about to crank up and leave towards the end of the afternoon, and he said, "Scott, am I going to bother you if I fire this thing up?" And he goes, "Oh, heavens no, by all means, do what you got to do, man." And he acted that way to everyone. So I was extremely impressed with his congeniality, along with his politeness and his just overall kindness to everyone around him. And I feel like his energy level was high. Of course, I'm in the back of the boat, I'm like holding the camera. He's holding up 9 pounders, and I'm going, yeah, like I was so fired up. It reminded me a lot of Lee Livesey's
Lee
last day
Livesey.
at Lake Fork. That was very, very similar experience. So yeah, it was cool, man.
When you were explaining it there, that's the whole time. That's what I was thinking. Like in my head, I'm like, it's. I mean, Scott's crowd probably didn't drink near as much as Lee's crowd, but
Yeah, that's probably very true.
what was one of the cool things that you got to see that hardly anybody got to see? Most likely, what was it like showing up at the dock? With him and his mom, his dad, so many family members showed up there, and then all the people that indirectly basically work for his family.
Everybody.
What was that scene like?
It was a mob. I mean, let me start here. One of the things that I learned, and I learned it from Mike Iaconelli, and one of the ways that I judge people, which I try not to do anyway, but we all judge, right? And one of the things that helps me actually judge a person's character is how they are around their family, how they
Yeah.
are around their wife, how they are around their kids, their dad, their mom. Those other people. Fans are a completely different contingency of people. And sometimes, superstars in any sport don't act the same around fans as they do around their family. That's who they really are. And one time at a classic, I was covering Iaconelli. I think it was at Conroe in Houston, and he was he was the whole time before takeoff, he was totally focused on his family, especially his wife and his children. And so that really put a perception in my head as to how I see these professional anglers, and how that they're really just human beings, just they put their pants on just like everyone else. And so when we got back to the dock, I knew Scott had told me before we took off. He goes, "Man, he didn't say, I know my dad's going to be there. I know my mom's going to be there. I know all these people are going to be there." He goes, "I just really hope that my dad's there. And I really hope, the only person that can't be there, and I wish she could, but she's fishing at Gunnersville today, is Hillary, his daughter." And all the rest of his family and contingency were there. And as soon as he got back to the boat, I literally was like, "Okay, I'm going to get my stuff, and I'm going to shake his hand, and I'm out of here." Because I mean, it was like Tom Brady pulling up to the dock. It was, and I could see the emotion from them. The first person that got to Scott and he made his way through the crowd was Roland Martin, his dad. And to me, like, I just got goosebumps remembering that moment, because there's no when you're doing something like your dad was your mentor, he was your hero. He paved the way for not only you, but the rest of this industry and so many people. When someone like that walks up and gives you a hug and he goes, "Man, I heard you had a great day out there," and everyone just started laughing, that was a moment for me to remember, because that was not Roland Martin and Scott Martin. That was a dad and his son. And it was
Yeah.
really, really cool to see that.
I think it says a lot about their family too. You know, you think about it like, I mean, a lot of people will look and be like, wow, it'd be pretty cool to be Roland Martin's son, you know, and it obviously opens some doors for you, to have that family name, but to have the work ethic and to be as successful as Scott is, you know what I mean? There, like, if you
Oh
look at
yeah.
in the history of not just fishing, in any sport, I mean, to be the son of Roland Martin is not an easy thing to live up to. And it's
Constantly
amazing.
trying to
And you look at Hillary. I mean, my prediction for a long time is she'll be the biggest Martin of all of them eventually.
she's got the tools.
Yeah. So it's really that is incredible to hear and see happen.
It was neat. I walked away. I thought about, okay, I'm going to pull my camera out and film this, but quite frankly, I mean, his videographer, McCoy was there, McCoy Fisher was rolling, but honestly, from a dad perspective, I had a dad that I loved very much. He taught me everything that I know. I think about him every single day. And now being a dad to Walker and Aspen and Scarlett, I thought to myself, I'm not doing my job right now because I should probably be filming this emotional moment with Scott and Roland, and his mom was there, his wife. I mean, you could see the genuine authenticity in this family affair in this moment. And I remember I asked Scott before we left on camera, actually on live, I said, if you could say one thing to your dad right now on live television, if he's watching, what would you say? He said, I would just say, Dad, thank you so much. I get choked up, man. Like this is the
Wow.
kind of stuff that chokes me up. And he said, I just want to thank my dad for everything that he's done for me and the sport. And for me to, he knew he was going to win. I didn't tell him. I mean, I have to. He had 30 something pounds, and which meant Tucker or Randall Tharp had to catch 40 pounds, to beat him. And so he knew he won. And he got choked up, and I knew. I was like, my mentor in production one time told me, your job is to make people cry because that makes you pull the emotional center out of who they really are. And when he said that, it told you everything you need to know about how Scott Martin feels, about what he does, where he got it from, and just the authenticity behind that appreciation. And so, I mean, dude, go Scott, go Roland. Congratulations. That was impressive. Even and people say, well, that's your home lake. Well, let me tell you, and you know this, Dave, that's harder than winning a tournament, that's not your home lake. The pressure, all that stuff. I mean, let's just face it. The last time we were there, he choked. He had a great first day, and then things just fell apart on him. This day, he didn't let that happen. He wins, and it was an incredible experience.
He also comes into that event after just being the first guy out of the classic this past year.
Hmm.
And so he's not fishing the classic, but he goes into that event and now he's automatically in the 2025 Bassmaster Classic. What do you think that does to him this year?
I know what it does because he said it. Like he was so relieved, and it's like, you know, it's like when Jason won at Chickamauga, he could let his hair down and let his hands fly the rest of the season because the pressure of qualifying for the classic was off of his back. And it's more of a gorilla than people think it is when that's on your back, particularly if you haven't qualified. If you're Scott Martin, you haven't qualified for the classic, and this pressure to be that guy is on your back. And then all of a sudden the Dan Marino criticism comes in and all that crap. And then you win a tournament on your home lake. Your dad won a tournament. The last tournament he won there was 1991, which he was being compared to. And then to shatter like Swindle's 80
3 day.
pound record and all those things involved, it was just overwhelming. And I mean, I don't know how many people realize how historical that actually was, but there was a lot of different variables that that or a lot of bowling pins that fell down that day. As Scott Martin, as on day 3, that can be one of the most, or day 4 can be one of the most challenging days because you've caught hundreds of fish out of the spot. There's 87 other boats catching hundreds of fish, and you just don't know what that day is going to bring. And for him to finish, all I could think about that day was, when you win tournament, Kevin Van Dam told me this one time, you got to know how to win. And like the Chiefs do, or the Patriots did, or whatever it is. I know. I did that for you.
I'm a little
You
giddy.
have to know how to win to keep winning, right? And that's what he did.
Yeah.
He shut
I,
the door.
and what he's been through the last number of years. I mean, to come to the opens, to have to qualify for the elites after, for all intents and purposes, already having a Hall of Fame career, literally. Like, if Scott Martin never comes to Bass, I believe he's a Hall of Famer. You know what I mean? Like, you look at what
100%.
he's accomplished at FLW, but he comes and he qualifies through the opens, which is no walk in the park, as everybody's talked about. And then the first few years on tour, he made the classic every year, but this past year, but it's not up to the Scott Martin standard. But that's also a pressure that he carries, because if you're anyone else, you're like, hey, you're just getting started, good for you. But when you're Scott Martin, he holds a much higher standard. To go through all that and then to win, is pretty incredible. I got to correct you on one thing, because we're going to get hammered in the comments. It had to be Christie's win in Orange that you're talking about, because when he won on Chick, he had already qualified for the Classic because he's the previous Classic champion.
Sorry about that.
And I don't mean to call you out, but
No. I'm glad you did.
They hold us to a very high standard.
I know. That's a lot to remember, and I'm glad you corrected me, and thank you for that. And sorry about that to all the Mercer fans out there. I want to say one other thing too. One of the things that stands out, like everyone talks about Kevin Van Dam's work ethic, it's constant. You're marketing for your sponsors. You're constantly learning new things about your equipment. You never know everything about the fish and the resources that you're using. And you talk about mega superstars, the Kevin Van Dams in the fishing world, the Patrick Mahomes of the football world, or whatever it is. When you're a mega star, you never stop. You don't have an off button. And I will say this about Scott Martin, with all the TV productions that he does, all the sponsorship plugs that he's doing, the angling, the businesses that he's a part of, all those things, he does not have an off button. Even when you're alone and the cameras are down and you're just sitting in the boat, it's constantly going. And it's not because of arrogance or attitude. It's just the way he's wired. It's the way he was brought up, and that's how he knows how to be successful. And it's respectful and admirable to me.
Oh yeah, big time, big time. I mean, you watch him when we have a weather day or whatever on the elites. I mean, there's no, like, some people are like, well, we're going to just go sleep for the day. There's no sleep. He's right away. Like, what lake do we go to that's nearby that I can shoot something? Like his McCoy is always working because it's like trying to keep up with freaking Roadrunner. You know what I mean? You watch Scott Martin, how he moves around, and it's incredible. What stood out to you outside of, how he was using that technology and his patience? But why do you think he was able to, seemingly basically look like he was in a different tournament, which is so rare to have in any tournament, never mind a 225 boat tournament?
You mean what
was there anything that he was doing that stood out to you?
It was his patience.
Just he's better at that?
No, I really think what separated him from all the people around him was his commitment to his patience. And again, when you talk to him, ask him. I'd bet a lot of money that that's exactly what he would say, because he stayed on fish that most people would have walked away from. And, he did like everyone else. He was switching baits. I mean, he caught his biggest fish, which was either 9.5 or 10 pounds on a spinning rod with a wacky worm because nothing else was working. He changed colors. He had this little he had a bait formula that actually was derived from the original fish formula, the very first scent that came out, which was actually done in my hometown on Kentucky Lake, fish formula.
Of course it was.
And he even mentioned that and we talked about that. But anyway, he did the same things everyone else does, but his commitment to his patience, and he said that a multitude of times, either on camera or off camera. He said, I'm not moving. He would pull down. He might change angles because that fish had seen the bait so many times, and he didn't do the vibrating rod thing like Drew Cook does. I mean, he barely moved his baits across the beds, and it was literally patience. And even he would go back and fish maybe 2 or 3 more grass clumps and then come back to that same spot. He would literally pull down at the same angle and start fishing the same exact way again. And, I would say that his electronics did help him understand the mood of the fish because he couldn't see it. Even with his glasses on, you couldn't see through the water because of the murkiness. And so he was analyzing the mood of the fish and just literally used patience to catch every single fish that he caught. Not one of them was caught on the first cast. None of them were. He had to work for every single one of them, and eventually he caught every fish that he was trying to catch. It was cool, man.
A very cool moment. I mean, that technology allows you to be more patient. I mean, it's like it turns
does.
Everything into sight fishing, literally, because you know what the fish are doing. But now you get to know what they're doing. I think even more so because if you look at a previous, you mentioned Drew Cook sight fishing. Those fish are acting a certain way. You got to be a certain distance close to them, so you're interrupting the way they act most likely, anyways. So yeah, I think it was an awesome win and a freaking great start to the season, if you ask
Oh my
me.
goodness.
Not just for him. I mean, for Bass. Like, I
Oh,
mean, what
people were
all of a
fired
sudden?
up. I mean, it was just like this explosion, like you walk in, the doors open, it's just boom, Bassmasters is back. And I was when I got in the boat and we took off, at where we were at Roland Martin's boat ramp there at the Roland Martin compound, and right there from the docks, you literally have like a 50-yard idle to take off to where you can throttle down. And as soon as we start going through that first chute, that first famous chute through the trees and the grass there, coming out into the wide open space of Lake Okeechobee, I was thinking to myself, I'm so glad I'm here right now. I'm so glad that I decided to work the first open because I realized how much I missed being away and how exciting this sport really is when you're in the middle of it. What a great sport. We're so lucky, Dave.
Yeah, got
Dude,
some
we're so lucky, man.
very, very lucky. Very lucky. Did you spend any time at the Tiki Bar down at Roland Martin's Marine?
I have before, but I
Oh,
didn't on this occasion.
not
Yeah.
this time.
My brother-in-law, ironically enough, we flew in and out of West Palm Beach, Florida, and it's an hour and a half from Clewiston. And so I flew in and I texted my sister who's in Tucson, Arizona at the Gem and Mineral Trade Show. I texted her and I said, I just landed in West Palm Beach. And she goes, Oh, Devin's there. That's her husband. And he's my brother-in-law. He's just freaking, we have the best time together. So I contacted him and he was staying with a friend. They were having a crawfish boil on Saturday night. So me and Brandon Fiend decided to pack up as soon as the weigh-in was over, and we hauled ass to West Palm Beach and drank beer and ate crawfish that night with my brother-in-law. So that's what we did.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sounds like a good way to Finish off the week. I do love a good tiki bar, though. I'm a big fan
I do
of tiki
too.
bars.
And that they have a cool one.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a nice place.
So what do you got now? Are you home until the Elite Series starts? Or are
I'm
you
home
at
until
this next
Toledo Bend.
Open?
No, I've decided, with my kids and all the activities that they're getting into and all that space, I have to be a dad first, and I'm gone enough as it is. So I've decided to work the first open and then the last three opens, and then obviously all the elite events. So I won't be back at another open until what, 4 5 more pass. But I'm looking forward to Toledo Bend and all the anglers on the elite anglers are getting fired up on their social media again, and their boats are wrapped, and everybody got their boats on time this year. And it's we're gonna have a good year. This is gonna be big. I can you can feel the energy already.
You excited about the first two being in Texas?
I am, because it's different. Normally we're in
Yeah.
Florida, and I just got the, Florida thing out of my system. Um, and I'm looking forward to seeing what Toledo Bend. I watched a little. I think Dustin won the Major League
DC?
Fishing event, yeah, last weekend at Toledo Bend, and there were some really big fish caught.
Yeah, Cliff
And
Crochet, an 11-pounder.
yeah, I saw that. That was pretty cool. So, and I think some of those guys had mentioned they were there just a little early this year. So, whatever that means for us and the elites, are we going to hit it at the right time? If we do, that could be a whole bunch of Scott Martins there, because there's some big fish in that lake. And then Lake Fork, we're always there, at a different time of the year. For us to be there this early is going to be really what's it going to be like? What's Lake Fork going to be like this time of year?
I mean, the question about Lake Fork this time is, can anyone beat Lee Livesey? You know what I mean? Like, he's been I mean, and he'll downplay it and tell you, but that to me is, like you said, to win at home. Everybody says, well, that's your home lake. Well, look at, I mean, the Johnston brothers, as highly touted as they are on the St. Lawrence River, and they deserve every accolade they get there. But we've
Absolutely.
been there a bunch, and they've won one elite and one open out of those times. It is very, I mean, they're almost always, I don't think there's ever been a time where one of them is not in the top 10, top 5 even.
Right.
But to actually seal the deal and win the way Lee has the last two times on Lake Fork has been incredible. I'm
And Lake
excited
Fork
about the
is
season.
Lake Fork is up. Lake Fork is at almost full capacity, and all that vegetation that was growing over the last 4 or 5 years with the water levels down to where they were are going to be underwater. Does that mean, are the fish going to be out on structure when we get there, or are they going to be up in shallow water? If they're in shallow water, how are they going to get to them? It's going to be a really interesting derby, and I'm excited about these first two events being where they are. And of course, I can't wait to get to Tulsa and the Classic.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what I'm excited about? I'm excited about Jake's Take being back in my life.
I
I have missed you.
missed you too, Dave.
Well, and I'm sure the fine folks that tune in, well, I hope they missed us, but we are back, and I'll let you go to where are you going right now, to train with Ivan Drago, or what's next?
I'm actually going to work out.
Well, of course you are. Of course you are.
Yeah.
This has been Jake's Take, and I'm so happy to have you back in my life. And we will see you in Texas very, very soon.
Thank you.
So good to have Jake's Take back in our lives. Thank you, Jake Latendresse. And that's not all. We got more. It is time for Clunn Day, Clunn Day, Clunn Day. Rick Clunn. Rick Clunn, I am somewhat nervous right now, just simply because you agreed to do this, and I don't want to screw it up on the first ever episode. How are you doing?
I like you when you're nervous, because you get out of the MC mode into the real. And the problem I've always had with MCs and writers, and I've talked to you and Zona both. I didn't know what part of y'all was real, but when you get nervous, you get real, and I like what I see. So that's good. I'm glad you're nervous.
Do you get nervous often? What makes Rick Clunn nervous?
Uh, a young kid back in the audience is asking me, what's the biggest bass you caught, Mr. Clunn? And back then it was 8 pounds. And this was after I'd already won 2 world championships. And when I tell him it's 8 pounds, he goes, well, hell, my grandma's caught one bigger than that. Every time after I did a seminar, I got nervous that kid was going to ask me that question. So that was in the early days when, right, I was having to get used to being in front of an audience and a crowd. And like you say, answering questions. And I don't really get that nervous anymore. When you do a show, you want a big audience, right?
Yeah.
You like to think you have a big audience. Well, when we used to do seminars, your biggest fear was nobody would show up. And then I finally just made myself realize, and there was times when just only a handful of people showed up. Even I did one recently up in Kansas City, and we only had a handful of people show up because the Kansas City Chiefs, Mahomes and Kelsey was playing that day. Okay. So, but I kind of years ago, I said, I don't care if only one person's sitting out in that audience. That person might have drove 200 miles to hear me tell them, and I'm going to give them the best I got.
Yeah.
If it's a 1 or 100. So that kind of got over the nervousness a little bit.
Yeah. I always think bigger the crowd, the easier it is. The small audience is tougher. And I just use the 10% rule, whether you're trying to make somebody cheer, somebody cry, somebody laugh, it doesn't matter. If 10% of people laugh and there's 10,000 people there, that's a big laugh. If there's 10 people there and 10% of them laugh, that is one dude in the back of the room, and it just makes the joke even more awkward. Did it take you a long time, knowing you now, when you first got in, did it really take you a long time to get accustomed to being that person? Like, would you rather that part of the sport just went away on you?
No, I would. There's an energy to that part. It's not always the same. Obviously, we have different venues,
Yeah.
and some audiences just are humongous, and some are not, just due to the venue we were at. If we're going to Toledo Bend here in just a few weeks, that venue there probably won't be gigantic because they have one of those events going on every weekend. Now they don't have necessarily the same names, but still, it does have an effect. Where if you go to Florida, like we do in February, and of course you got a lot of people my age down there. They're looking for something to do, and that audience is huge, and it's an audience that I can relate to really a lot easier, and but at the same time, the young audience is showing back up. You hear my bird?
What kind of bird do you have?
A loon.
What?
It's a loon. It's our security system. Melissa just drove out our road and triggered the security system, which is a loon. So it's appropriate, But no, let's go on to wherever I lost track on this audience deal.
Well, you mentioned the season starts in a couple of weeks. What is your life like preparing for the season? I mean, you've done this 49 other times. I'm sure you've got it down to a pretty good rhythm.
Yeah, but it's always there's really a lot more going on than most people think. And it's going to bore them when I tell them what it is. I've got to get a new belt ready. You got to get new equipment on it. You got to break that in. You got to make sure that equipment's all working correctly. You got to get new uniforms. And I just got a message back from Bass that my flag on my shoulder was facing the wrong direction on these shirts that I'm supposed to have next week. Okay. And so we're bearing, so there's always that little stuff like that. And but it's again, to me, it's not anything big. It's just getting prepared. And that's just the physical things you got to do. The mental things to me are the ones that will test you. Beginning of our season is like New Year's. You know how many people make certain promises on New Year's? Oh, this year I'm going to do something different. I'm going to do this better. I'm going to change this. And I'm going to get in better shape, you know, blah, 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 and all that. And unfortunately, most of us don't do it. And we get fired up for a month or so, and then we go back to our old habits. And fishermen are no different. And I'm at this stage where I'm really trying to change hard because I know I have to. And if I still want to compete at a good level. And but boy, it's really not easy. The mental part to change is just not easy. And at first, I've been trying to do it for several years now, ever since, you know, this new style of angler has came on the scene. And I've been trying to do it for several years. And so at first, I guess I'm just going to start doing a lot of what they're doing. And I don't mean, we're talking about the equipment that's being used nowadays and changing over to using this electronics the way you're going to have to. And, but okay, this year I'm kind of approaching it mentally a little bit different. The problem with changing is, it doesn't mean you have to give up what you used to do well. And but you do have to devote more time to the change, but don't just throw away what used to work. So I really want to blend them together. I know my old way still at certain days and certain bodies of water still is the way to do it. But I know on other bodies of water in certain days, I've got to do it this way. And the reverse is true for these young anglers, where they're really good at this new electronic way of fishing. They have to blend in my way of fishing. And you don't make the assumption that that's not good anymore, because it is good. It's not good every day, okay, like it used to be. Where what they do is really more efficient and more consistent every day, but not all days. And so that's when they have to turn into the old Rick Clunn, the old Kevin Van Dam. So now I'm doing the reverse. I'm trying to maintain that, know the proper timing to do it, but then you know, be in practice probably, but also in the tournament, be blending this other style in and see how they're going to work together. Because it would be sad for me to give up an old friend, okay? And the way I used to fish was an incredible old friend. I mean, it just gave me so much. It allowed me to connect at levels that I would have never connected at with the world we live in. But this other way now can do the same thing, but in a different way. And so I just got to find the right way to blend them together, you know, and it's not easy, but that's kind of what I'm attempting to do this year.
How do you know, in simple terms, I mean, I know you could get real deep and be like, every day's different, but how do you know when it's time to rely more on technology and when it's time to rely more on your, let's call it for lack of a better term, instinctual way of fishing?
It's kind of like the way I won the last two tournaments of my career, 2016, 2019 on the St. Johns River. I didn't, and it's just true with my style of fishing. It only works in small windows of time most of the time. There are a few days that it works all day, or kind of all day. But most of the time, there's just these small windows of time that it really works efficiently. And the rest of the time, you're really wasting your time. And so that's my opportunity to realize what those key windows of time are for my bodies of water and are from my O style. And then when those windows are not there, maybe for the next 3 hours a day, then I've got to switch. Now that's when to make the switch. Because the one thing I've noticed about let's use the word, I'm trying not to, but because everybody freaks out about it, but the forward facing sonar, what's that? People go, okay, I'm still catching good strings. You know, let's use St. Lawrence River as the last tournament. I was pushing 20 pounds a day doing my way of fishing. But and occasionally I can catch a 20 plus pound day, but I can't do it every day. That old style of fishing is incredibly difficult to put those magnum strings together every day. And that's where this new style of fishing is it seems to be so much more consistent. Their bad days are 20 pound days, not 17 pound days. Okay. Their good days could be, who knows, 27, 28 pounds. I'm again thinking of the smallmouth tournaments. But that's their good days. But their bad days are kind of my good days. So that's what you got to realize, even though those days are fun. I mean, yeah, if I'm burning a spinnerbait, catching 20 pounds of smallmouth a day, that's hard to beat as far as the actual emotion and fun of it. But at the same time, I'm a tournament angler, and I got to figure out how, and I've had good days. I've had 30 plus pound days doing what I do. But there's I understood those small windows of time and when to be there and when to maximize them. And what I think this other technique allows is a level of consistency we have never seen.
Yeah. Yeah. No, how have you rejected and I agree with you. It is the F word, forward facing sonar. You start bringing it up and it amazes me. I mean, part of me, I love the fact that people are as passionate as they are about a sport. That means they love it. It means they care about it, but it does bring different emotions out in people. But the average person paints it as it's a younger guy's game and the older guys struggle at it. How have you rejected the all too common narrative of, yeah, that's not fishing, I don't do that? How have you been so different in this process?
Well, the older we get, obviously in all things in life, we increase our resistance to change. So number one, that's our problem, being older guys. But the one thing you got to remember is most of these young anglers I know have been doing this less than 5 years. And I've seen them learn this technique, and some of them less than 2 years or 3 years. Okay. So am I resisting change so much that I don't think I can take that amount of time and really learn this technique? No, I remember when flipping came in, D. Thomas came out here and Dave Levy came east and kicked everyone's butt. I mean, Dave won four major tournaments in this country when he first came, Dave Levy, flipping. In almost every tournament, he won by over 25 pounds in a 3-day event. He was kicking our butt. So I could have taken the same attitude then toward this. Golly, that's a technique I don't know, I haven't done, I don't do, blah, blah, blah. Instead, I embraced the technique. Okay. I was younger though. I wasn't in the age I am now. And I embraced that technique. And I said, okay, what makes them good? And what makes them good was their ability to isolate fish. And basically, once they isolated the fish, let's use Okeechobee, as an example, there's grass everywhere. That's a hard place to isolate fish. Okay, now, yes, there's a lot of fish in a lot of different places there, but Dave went there and he just found 2 or 3 reeds out in the middle of hydrilla or something, matted over, and he'd power all the way to them and flip his jig down in there and boom. He wouldn't even make another cast. He might make 2 or 3 in there, then he'd power over to another one. He'd isolated those fish, even in all that grass, they were holding on something different. And I said, I can do that. I'm good at patterning fish. And so I said, out west, you got to remember where they come from. They don't have to isolate as difficult areas as we have in the south and the east. So I had been fishing that kind of stuff my whole life. I knew how to isolate fish in these massive weed beds. So obviously I said, I got to learn their technique because I know I can outfish them this way. Okay. And I've kind of looked at this forward facing the same way. What's hard is we can't really see what they're isolating unless they're letting you see the screen, and yet they're isolating with that forward facing sonar. They're just those fish. They're like they're like right now. Those fish are following the same thing that they followed in the winter patterns. They're following channels. They're following the bait. And yes, you might be able to find isolated fish that are not, but so I've got to understand what they're isolating and then use their equipment to find it. Find it. All they're doing is they're just so much more efficient at it, instead of the old way we used to do it. So I'm optimistic that it's a technique that I'm not too old to learn. Now, if you think you're too old to learn, then yeah, you're not gonna like it.
How many times in your career has something come along like flipping? A great example, because I'm also thinking about, I could have just imagined what people said, the exact same things they said. I'm sure, like, it's barbaric. The fish don't get a chance to bite. You know what I mean? Like, there's people that want to paint forward facing sonar in that, but I'm sure you could say all the same things about flipping
Similar.
in the day. So
Yeah.
how many times in your career is it perpetual that it's like every 5 years there's something new coming, every 2 years, every 10 years?
I would hope so. Getting back to flipping. Oh, they wanted to outlaw every long rod that existed. Oh no, you can't. Ray Scott, they were limiting what size length rod you could have in the boat because of the flippers for bringing in custom 8-foot rods. No, that's too big. That's too big. You can't have that big a rod. Don't fit in the rod boxes. They didn't fit in some of those old boat rod boxes. Of course, they solved that pretty quick by making bigger rod boxes. But at the same time, that's just they were looking for somehow to censor it. And golly, I remember fishing with Carl Lawrence when he said that even there were states up north that wanted to ban the little simple green box.
Yeah.
We made. Of course, the Alabama rig is another example. And really, yeah, there are extremes we eventually probably need to watch out for. Alabama rig, do you really want a guy having 15 lures tied on and flinging it out there? No, that's an extreme, but I think if you get back to where it's reasonable, it's still a valid technique. Same way with flipping, same way with forward facing. Yeah, we're already seeing a few extremes, but let's just see what those really are, and then just temper them back some.
Do you think the Alabama rig should have been outlawed?
No, it was just panic.
Yeah.
No, I do. I think that it should have been limited, and most states have limited how many hooks you can put on it. I think, I'm not going to say I'm smart enough to say the exact proper rig, but no, I don't think it should have been. It's because not only is that, inadvertently, we limited some other lures when we did that.
Yeah.
And we limited a spinnerbait when you did that. You limited, a spinnerbait was the original Alabama rig to begin with.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. It's the fishermen are going to continue to try to figure a better mousetrap, and it amazes me that they continue to do that. Sometimes you think everything can be thought of, has already been thought of, but no.
Innovation. I mean, and I think that most people, when they think of things, they don't think of them in competitors' eyes. Like, I always think the Alabama rig is prime example. Like you said, I don't think that the rig itself was a problem, but what it would have become, I think we're seeing happen with forward facing sonar, the exact same thing, where it might not be a problem, but now we're going to have guys with 7 units. Is that a problem? Does there have to be a line made somewhere?
I think, yeah, I'm not going to say what that is, but definitely I think you can hit an extreme there, which doesn't make any sense from many angles. I mean, what is the greatest thing that you wanted to that I've seen in my career for 50 years now that people wanted to ban? What's the number one thing?
I'm gonna say you. They wanted to ban you.
The tournament angler. I've seen. I'll watch that my whole career early on. Oh, you need to ban these tournaments. You shouldn't allow the tournaments, and some states didn't allow tournaments, and because yeah, we're a pretty aggressive group, and we should, and both, most of us still treat people right, but there's some guys out there in the tournaments that don't want to treat people right. But it's just not tournament guys, it's other guys as well. But my point is that we wanted to ban the number one reason that fishing is still alive. Fishing would not exist if it weren't for tournaments. Not what you see here. This industry, the amount of lures, all these innovations. This fishing is the catalyst to keep fishing alive. Okay, that's why even in the worst economic times we have, fishing goes up. People go to the lake more. Okay, because yeah, it's a great source of sanity, but at the same time, we're bringing all this new stuff. You just went to some meeting at the Space Center in Houston, and they're bringing, I don't know, I haven't heard yet, but they're trying to introduce some new stuff into the sport, which keeps people interested, keeps people and you lure. I remember when I was a kid, and my neighbor went to Lake Washita in Arkansas, and he come back raving about this super lure that you couldn't even buy. You had to rent. Okay, it cost you $10 a day to rent, but you had to put up a $50 deposit in case you lost it. Do you know what that lure was?
No.
Rapala. The first little Rapala menace. You had to rent when they came to this country. But everybody went nuts over it. You know, this. So that's the neat thing about fishing and the communication and the education and the innovation. You know, it's a huge catalyst. But I can tell you how many outdoor riders and how many non-tournament anglers went at outlaw tournaments for years. So it's nothing new.
What scares me is the division. That, to be honest, and I always say that, I'm like, our enemy is not an angler that likes to fish different, whether it be a fly angler, whether it be a non-tournament. That's not, I mean, we all love fishing. Like, I mean, and it, sadly, if you look at in the hunting world, they had to be threatened a few times for them to band together. You know, now you would never ever hear a rifle hunter say that they don't like what a bow hunter does and vice versa. It's very, very, because they had to band together. I worry that one day we're going to be too busy fighting each other and how we think this sport should be taken, that people that just really want the sport taken can win the fight.
Yeah, I don't fear that as much as I might have used to, because of the amount of young anglers that are getting involved.
Yeah.
You know, because unfortunately, my age group is kind of sometimes the most opposing and the most negative, because we don't want things to, we remember the good old days, even though most of those don't exist. You know, it's like make America great again. What? Okay, when was it great for you? You're in Canada, of course, but when was it great for me? When was it great for him? It's all different. So
Yeah.
we talk about making America great again. Was it the Civil War? Was it the Revolutionary War? Was it World War I? Was it World War II? Was it Vietnam War? On and on. We're still trying to be great. We're still trying to live up to our potential, and we have tremendous potential. But let's don't throw these phony ideals out there. And in fishermen, we tend to do the same thing. We tend to remember that great trip when there wasn't nobody else on the lake, you know, and the fish were biting every cast. And then all of a sudden, next weekend, there was 25 tournament boats, stupid guys running around in jumpsuits in some bass club, you know, getting in our way. So I don't know. I'm like you. I think we get way too caught up sometimes. And I mean, it's still, I have to quote President Bush. Rick Clunn, today you're not the world championship angler, and I'm not the president of the United States. We're just two guys who love to fish. We have that in common. And just like you say, hopefully we don't forget what we have in common as fishermen.
You brought him up. Were you a fan of the jumpsuit era in professional bass fishing?
Oh gosh, Roger Moore, I can never forget him. He's the first one that copied NASCAR and Evel Knievel. He showed up on the scene with an Evel Knievel type suit, you know. No, I wasn't. I'm not a fan, but I ignored it. It's just part of the game. But it's, again, it goes against my grandmother, what she said about don't toot your own horn. You know, if you got all these patches on, it's like wearing medals or something. You know, you're kind of tooting your own horn, and really it had nothing to do with fishing. You know, the beauty of it, you know. So, but it's just part of the game. And sometimes there's a lot of the game that I don't need. You know, it doesn't upset me, but I don't need it.
One of the coolest things that's happened this year that I think has opened a lot of people's eyes is the show Bass did, the cast. And it looked back on the building of the sport, how it all started. Obviously, you know, the first episode was all centered around Ray Scott, and there's an episode around you. As I've watched all of them, I mean, two things. One thing stood out. It's shocking to me how many young anglers didn't know a lot of that. You know,
Oh, yeah.
I just take for granted that you learned it, you know, like whether you, I mean, I wasn't around during a lot of it, but I still searched it out and learned it. But I always wondered, like, what has it been like for you to watch that series? Because you were actually there.
It gave me a view from outside of it because I was inside of it. And when you're inside of it, you have a different view. And it really emphasized the positives, and I like that because it's not all positive. I mean, if you give the complete view, it was never as positive as it appears. But it made me, it allowed me to look, reflect, and really appreciate things and people in a way that at the time I couldn't even appreciate because I was in the middle of the battle. And I understood a lot of them. I understood the importance of them even back then, like Bill Dance. He changed the image of a bass fisherman. He was the first to do it. Actually, you could actually have teeth and catch fish and talk well. But before then, you know, we weren't really looked at it the same way other sports were. You know, then Roland came along and showed that it wasn't luck. There's truly an art and science behind it. I was aware of those, but even appreciate now looking back on those shows, those people even more. And so it's kind of neat. In fact, you asked what you could do, but I think mine is coming up this Saturday, and I haven't seen it, so I have no idea what they put on it. I think I'm the last one in the series, and I see, you know how I fit in, and this is just my view. I fit in with Ray's politics because in other words, I was there when Bush was standing on one side of me and Clinton was standing on the other. And Ray was scared to death what might come out of my mouth. And I didn't even know half the time what's going to come out of it. And he even asked, I may have told you this, he even asked, he knew I was going to win. I had such a big lead. He said, "You want me to write down what you can say tomorrow?" I said, "No, Ray, I can't. I wouldn't be able to do that." And fortunately for Bass and Ray and me and all the other anglers, I spit something out that they liked. There's no place else on the planet, no matter what you think of, are we a perfect country? No. Will we ever be? Probably not. But where else in the world could I chase little green fish and make $50,000 in 3 days? I don't know any place else. So Ray, that really, hit home. That's what the sport needed at that time. Even Bush went back and used that speech before Congress. So So Ray was talented, very talented. He was obviously a huge promoter, lied a hell of a lot. And about, well, I'm going to explain that. Even to this day, it's hurting a lot of the young anglers, those early non-truths. And that was, you win the BASS tournament, you become a millionaire. Really, Ray? Okay. Yeah, there are some guys, Jimmy Houston, and those guys that put, TV shows and all that kind of stuff. But that was misleading so many of these people that I wish I feel sad for, because I see it happen now. They don't get rich quick, and it ruins their love for what they love to do, which was fishing. And but at the same time, he was brilliant. Ray was brilliant at sucking in the right people at the right time. The most important person he ever brought in my opinion, Bob Cobb.
Yeah.
Ray would have never survived without Bob Cobb, because he could not get along with the media. But Bob knew how to do that, and Bob did. But then Ray kept bringing in the right person at the right time. Like I said, Roman, Bill Dance, other people that just fit with where the sport was going at that point in time. He was brilliant at Dylan, getting those people involved.
I've always said, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I've always said one of the greatest things Bass has, obviously Ray started it, and he's the chicken that laid the egg. I mean, but nobody could have done that like Ray. You needed a sales guy. Roll up your sleeves. I'm going to go out there and I'm going to tell the story to the world. I'm going to create a sport, basically, like I'm turning a pastime into a sport. And then if you look, then Helen Sevier comes along, who had worked with Bass, cared about Bass, but it was probably at the time where it needed to be a little bit more professional, took to a different level. And then ESPN comes along, which, I mean, exploded so many things. And then we're at a point where, if you remember, I remember people being literally scared that Bass is just going to, ESPN's just going to shut down Bass because they're tired of it. You know what I mean? They'd take their shot to make the next NASCAR. They decided it wasn't going to be, and people were worried. Well, then the perfect ownership comes along with Jerry, Don, and Jim, who literally bought the business simply just because they cared about it that much. You need it back in those hands. And I still say that the Andersons, I mean, although they've done some great things, you can't really judge an ownership until after that term's done. But it seems like the right people have had it at the right times. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I totally agree with it. And probably the biggest transition was Jerry McInnes.
Yeah.
He brought ESPN to it.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing that every angler out there has forgotten, tell me the most important thing that was ever done for the angler in the sport of fishing, competitive angler.
Several things, and I think we're going to agree on this. Your boats,
Absolutely.
names on your jerseys, wraps, all of those things came from the mastermind that is Jerry McInnes.
Exactly. And nobody, being an angler and knowing how our boats were all taken away from us at the most important times, which was most critical to us maintaining our sponsors. And finally, them giving us our boats that we could drive through the Bassmaster Classic and represent our sponsors. We weren't fishing out of a strange boat, back then. And don't get me wrong, Forrest Wood was one of the finest people ever in this industry. He gave more to this industry than anybody. But we were forced to fish out of Ranger boats in the Classic. We couldn't use our own boats. And then the other circuits did the same thing. The FLW, you weren't even allowed to wear your jersey if it didn't have their sponsors on it. So when he gave us all of those things, it's probably the biggest thing. And then social media added to that is the biggest thing that fishermen ever have gotten so far. And yeah, we still need non-endemics to get involved. That still hasn't been figured out. But at the same time, that was a huge transition. Was that ESPN and Jerry McInnes and those things that took place.
Why do you think Jerry? I've always wondered this. Why do you think Jerry doesn't get some of the accolades or credit that some others? You mentioned Forrest Wood. You mentioned, like, if you take Forrest Wood, Bill Dance, the list goes. I mean, literally. I mean, there's so many people that, but I don't feel like Jerry, for as much as he's done for this sport, I don't feel like he gets as much love as he deserves. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. I do, and I know why he doesn't get it. And this is going to make me look real bad when I say it. He didn't get it because of the hatred for bass. He took on an organization that was hated by the anglers. Okay. And that's kind of contrary to what you see. I'm talking about the masses of anglers. I'm not talking about the few of us that made it. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that there was, you know, there was a huge hatred for bass when those anglers left us in 2016. That was all the animosity toward BASS, and Jerry had very little to do with it. He had inherited that, and he knew that, and that's one of the reasons he gave us our boats, because he knew it. He said, I've got to do something that the anglers feel is fair and right and gives him an opportunity to make a living, because we didn't have any way of proving our value to companies. A little patch on your shirt. So all of a sudden now, he came with Raptor truck, Raptor boat. Put that stuff on your truck. You're driving thousands of miles down the highway. You're on the water all over the country. And now you've got something you can sell to your sponsors that's legitimate. So, but there was just so many things that happened to the anglers. I mean, I hate to go into them, but I'm not going to, because it's too many, and it's the past. And now I think a lot of that stuff has improved, with the exception of the non-endemics. And I don't know, there's nobody to blame that on. It's just the way capitalism works.
Man, the biggest, toughest thing we're going to have with these is keeping them short, Rick. And not because of you, but because when you answer questions, I always have so many other questions. And I do have one from our last conversation, because we did broach the topic of the one time that you decided to take your clothes off and go fishing. And when I swear to you, I rewatched the show, and I never almost ever rewatch shows, but I rewatched it, and I was listening to your answers, and the whole time I don't know if it's a bad angel on his shoulder or what, and it just keeps telling me, why didn't you ask Rick Clunn if he caught him real good that day? Do you remember catching any big ones?
I don't remember catching a fish, to be honest. I just remember the next day when I sat down in his chair, I couldn't hardly sit down. My butt was burning so bad. So no, I tried to forget that, but people keep bringing it up. It's did you ever fish naked? And I go, well, yeah. So anyway, like I said, and I'm just proving today again that you got to be careful what might come out of my mouth.
I don't think so. I think everything that comes out of your mouth is gold. You're a gift to our sport, and I enjoy this time that we get to spend together. What is last question, between now and when I see you in Texas? In my head, I envision you as you ever seen the movie The Days of Thunder? And his crew chief is in the barn, and he's looking at the car, and he is like walking down it and talking to the car, and visualizing the success he's going to have in this car. In my head, that's what I visualize happening with you when you're getting your boat ready. Is any of that true?
It's not as true as it used to be. I mean, used to, visualization was a huge part of my preparation every day, because I totally believe in it. I'd studied it. I'd studied all different ways of approaching it through meditation and visualization, and the Olympic stars and how they prepared mentally. And so, I don't do it as much, and it's my regret that I don't do it as much as I used to, because it takes time, and it takes a lot. When you're doing it at your best, you're isolating yourself from a lot of people you care about. Maybe there's a way to do it without doing that. I don't know how. I mean, I used to spend hours waiting for everybody to go to bed, and then I'd spend hours listening to tapes, and then going through long meditations, and then going through long visualizations of how this snowstorm is going to come out. How do I see it happening? How do I want it to happen? Rehearsing everything that can possibly happen. And in many, many ways, I've discovered, because I got to know some special forces guys, and how they do the same thing. They rehearse everything ahead of time. They visualized everything they're fixing to do ahead of time, and how they want it to turn out. And that rehearsing allows you to make better and quicker decisions. And better is the key word, because you've rehearsed all the possibilities. Okay, if I go over that bank tomorrow morning, is the wind going to be blowing, or 2 or 3 boats going to beat me there? Is the water gotten muddy from the creek running out? And have an answer for each one of those ahead of time. So I don't do it as much, because in my early career, I did it a lot, and I know it took a lot away from my family when I did.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a way to do it without doing that. It's kind of like being a Buddhist monk. Do they have much family?
Not that I know of. No.
No. And I don't want to liken myself to a Buddhist monk, don't get me wrong, because they're a lot deeper than I am, but I do have embraced a lot of those kind of techniques.
Well, and I know I told you it was the last question, but I got so can we do that together? Can we visualize together, Rick? Like, what is involved? No, you will not.
You got to have a clear mind and a clear heart.
which is not clear in me.
Well, it's hard to do with another individual. No, it wasn't directed toward you personally. It's just that you really don't want another energy there.
Okay.
Now, there are situations where you can have a guided energy of being another person.
Yeah.
It's kind of like doing a vision quest. You don't have buddies sitting around you doing a vision quest. You're by yourself. And okay. that's when things happen.
Okay. Can we maybe visualize together next time, or no?
No, I can talk about it. We can't actually do it. I mean, but then it gets you know how you can get out there.
Yeah. I like going any direction you choose to go, Rick. And I thank you for being here this month, and we'll see you again next month, but I'll see you before then in competition. What's the goal? 50th season. What is your outlook on the season?
To make a check. How many times you hear that? How many times you hear that? Because the last 3 years, I've only lost money at the professional level 4 times in 50 years. And in my last 3 years, I haven't made money doing what I love to do, and that's compete. So I would love to but I know that that's a wish that has to be, contemplated and seen, and I got to know how to do that. I just can't hope, it happens. It doesn't just happen. Nothing just happens. You got to make it happen.
Always great. The one and only Mr. Rick Clunn. Thank you, sir.
See, I like your fur.
Yeah, well, I'm ready for the season. 2 incredible guests, 2 incredible conversations. I thank you for spending a little time with me here this week. Make sure to check out Rick Clunn's episode of The Cast, airing this weekend on FS1. If you don't get FS1, you'll be able to see it on Bassmaster.com in the coming weeks. Please support little Riley Berghoff and her battle with cancer. The links are down below. And until next time, smile. Make somebody's day better. You can literally change somebody's day by simply smiling. Until next time, enjoy being, and as always, Bob Cobb, take it away.
Thanks for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe, because Bob Cobb of the Bassmasters told you to. You hear?